Hello, how you doing?
Hello everyone. Thanks for joining us.
My
Welcome
host is
to
Shane.
WAFR Bytes episode 3, reliability.
Episode three. Episode 3 of 4. We've met
Episode 3
where's the
already.
time going?
Time flies when you're having fun.
It does indeed. Yes. And I've got a new host as well, Rachel. Nice to have
Hello
you.
everyone. Lovely to be here. All right, we'll jump straight into it. Hey Alan.
Go
I'd
for
like
it.
to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we meet today, wherever that may be. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to episode 3 of WAFR Bytes, everyone. As Alan mentioned, my name's Rachel. I'm a business development manager here at Thoughtworks, and I'm really excited to speak to you today about the well-architected framework and today's focus, which is reliability. So for anyone who attended episodes 1 and 2, you'll remember Alan, but for any new attendees, would you like to introduce yourself, please, Alan?
Yep, my name's Alan. I am a pre-sales solutions architect lead here at Thoughtworks. I've got a technical problem right now with the light flashing in front of me. I'm also an AWS Ambassador, and I head up the Well-Architected program.
Excellent. I'll give you a moment to sort out your light, Alan, and I will quickly run through the agenda. So everyone, today what we're going to start with is I'm going to do a very brief introduction to Thoughtworks, who we are, what our service offerings are, and then Alan is going to define the well-architected framework for us. We're also going to delve into today's focus area, which is our reliability pillar. We're going to talk about how we can implement this into your existing AWS architectures, and then we are also going to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to pop them in the chat. We can answer them as we go. If there are some that are quite in depth, we might answer them all at the end. But yeah, we'd love to have some questions. So please pop them in there. All good, Alan? Ready to go?
All good. Yeah.
Wonderful. So who is Thoughtworks? We are a global software consultancy company. We've worked with some of Australia's biggest names, as you can see here, Qantas, Xero, NAB, and we've supported many clients in Australia from fledgling startups through to some of the country's largest enterprise brands. And the projects we've done range from bringing new ideas to life with technology to setting up robust IT infrastructure to ensure our clients are scalable for future growth. There are 4 main areas in which we support our clients. So customer experience, product and design. This is things like bringing your ideas to market, designing your customer experience strategy and product design. Next, we've got enterprise modernization and cloud. So think modernization strategy and execution, migrating to the cloud or making the most out of your investment in the cloud. We're even able to help with operations in the cloud through digital application management and operations, which we call DAMO for short. Data and AI. Here, we help customers build robust data strategies and platforms, as well as cutting-edge AI and Gen AI applications. Digital transformation and operations. Within DTO, we help our clients build and execute on digital strategies. So essentially, we're an end-to-end digital partner combining strategy, software, engineering, design, and organizational transformation. Over the last few decades, Thoughtworks has been at the forefront of technology innovations, with multiple pieces of literature being authored by our colleagues. The topics range from programming languages to architecture, software engineering patterns, continuous delivery, analytics, and building adaptive and responsive organizations. We wrote the book on complex project delivery, literally that big blue one there in the left-hand corner. So what we're trying to get across here is that thought leadership is a big part of our culture, and we're very proud to be ahead of the curve. We've been operational for over 3 decades, and currently we have over 10,000 employees across 51 offices in 18 countries. This allows us to build the perfect team to support our clients, often utilizing distributed teams across regions of the world. As a leading digital transformation partner, we also recognize the value and importance of collaborating with other trusted technology partners to bring our clients the very best solutions for their business challenges. We partner with AWS to build the capabilities required to succeed in today's digital landscape. We're actually a premier AWS partner, which is the highest tier of partnership that AWS has, with multiple AWS competencies and accolades, as you can see on the screen here. This is probably a really good segue for me to pass to my colleague, Alan. Alan recently actually received an award for being the top AWS Ambassador for Australia and New Zealand. So he also has an award for having all the AWS certifications under the sun. And so he's definitely the right person to delve a little bit deeper into this next section of our presentation. Take it away, Alan.
Thanks, Rachel. So over the next 30 minutes, hopefully, we're going to be talking about the AWS Well-Architected Framework. Over the series of the webinar, we've been going through 4 of the 6 pillars. But just to give you a recap of what those 6 pillars are, we started off with operational excellence, where the operational excellence pillar defines key topics such as automating changes, responding to events, and defining standards to manage daily operations. The security pillar looks at topics around confidentiality and integrity of your data, managing user permissions, and also establishing controls to detect security events and also how you respond to them. The reliability pillar is the 3rd pillar that we see on the screen today, and that's where we look at distributed system design, recovery planning, and adapting to changing requirements. And that is our topic for today. Performance efficiency is the 4th pillar of the framework, and that's where it looks at the resources that you pick, the types, the sizes. Are they optimized for your workload? How do you monitor that performance? And then also, how do you maintain efficiency as your business needs evolve and grow? Cost optimization, everyone's favorite pillar, 5th pillar on the framework. And this is where we start to look at those instances and resources that you might have chosen in the performance pillar. We're going to pick on them and we're going to see if they scale, and if they scale without overspending. How are you controlling the costs in your account? How are you getting the best return on investment? What's your long-term strategy financially? And then the 6th pillar of the framework is sustainability. And this is ultimately where we're looking at our carbon footprint. The resources that we put into our account, they're going to have an impact in the form of carbon emissions. How do we reduce those carbon emissions whilst maintaining maximum utilization? And that is the 6 pillars of the well-architected framework. As I said, today, we're going to be looking at the reliability pillar. In more detail, we'll be looking at designing principles of your network topology. We'll be looking at how you build and design a distributed design across that topology. And we're going to look at how you protect your data with suitable backup strategies. And then lastly, we'll be looking at what that disaster recovery plan should look like from a well-architected perspective. But it wouldn't be part of our webinar series if I haven't got a quote here from our old friend Werner Vogels at the Amazon CTO. Everything fails all the time. And yes, we used this quote 2 weeks ago in our first episode of observability. It's the same thing. We've got to understand our workload and understand it to the point that we build it ready to fail. We build it knowing it will fail. And what do we do to make sure that it stays resilient and reliable? The first topic of the reliability pillar is, excuse me 1 minute. I knew that was coming, sorry. The first topic is high availability. What is high availability? Before we even talk about it in terms of AWS, we need to understand what it means to us. And in some respects, it's different for everybody. It depends on what your business is trying to achieve. By definition, high availability is a characteristic of a system that aims to ensure an agreed level of operational performance, usually uptime for a higher than normal period. As I said, this varies based upon your business, what you're trying to achieve, what your outcomes might be. An office-based company might have a system that only needs to be available 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. That gives you quite a lot of scope for acceptable outages and an acceptable tolerance of outages. Whereas as an online retailer, you'll need to be available 24/7. I mean, we all put those sneaky Amazon orders at 3 a.m. on a Friday night, right? Rachel's trying to look innocent at this point. But in the meantime, you've also got to understand what the cost and effort versus the benefit of high availability is. What level of HA, high availability do we want to chase? What can we consume? If we look at it from the perspective of an uptime percentage, 99%, or what we call 2 nines availability, equals to 3.65 days per year. That's right, a very, very tiny amount, 1% of the year. If you think about 3.65 days a year, that's actually not much in terms of outage time. I mean, it could be planned outages, it could be rollouts, deployments, but sometimes we want a little bit better. If we look at 99.9%, the 3 nines of availability, 8.77 hours per year. Now, realistically, that's 1 business day in a year of outages. If we go to the further extreme, that we call the 5 nines, or 99.999% of availability, that's 5 minutes. 5 minutes of outage per year of tolerance. Just let that sink in for a second, because if you think about it, 5 minutes is not long. And if you have a little hiccup and somebody presses the reboot button on the wrong day at the wrong time, that 5 minutes is gone. And if that's the HA ratio that you're trying to achieve, you'll be breaching that very quickly. So you need to start setting realistic goals that do align with your business strategy as well. A lot of companies look for the 4 nines or the 3 nines, 99.9 or 99.99, or somewhere in between there. So the first thought there is, what is acceptable as your business? Coming back to the example of our office system versus retail, your office system, you might quite happily allow a system to go offline over the weekend and not have to deal with it till Monday morning. That's why you'd be chasing your 99% or less. Don't forget though, that's 99% of the time that needs to be up. Whereas as an Amazon-style retailer, you're probably looking for those 5 nines or more. But it's also worth noting that whilst you're chasing each one of these standards, for each 9 of availability, the cost starts to become more and more expensive. So how do we achieve high availability in a technology perspective, from an AWS perspective? One of the key pieces of technology used in any workload to make it more highly available is a load balancer, an elastic load balancer. And a lot of people say, but I'm only running one EC2 instance. That's okay, that's not a problem. If you still run an elastic load balancer with one EC2 instance, you are fronting your workload with an edge device, with an edge protection. Think like your NBN router at home is protecting your laptop from being exposed to the internet. Very similar. You'll put your workload down your EC2 instance or similar in a private subnet and have the load balancer on the outside. You get the protection of AWS Shield Basic, protecting you from nefarious little packets that shouldn't get through to your workload. At the same time, you can then start to apply protections like a WAF, a web application firewall, or you could take advantage of other features that may help you with security. In a similar way, Amazon CloudFront and API Gateway also do similar tasks. They are edge devices. In terms of high availability for your database services, think relational database services. You would be looking at a multi-AZ configuration, ensuring that you are spreading your workload across 2 availability zones. Coming back to the EC2 instance earlier, whilst that's in a load balancer, you could pitch your workload in either availability zone or duplicate it if you need to. So all of a sudden you've got your compute workload in 2 availability zones, your database workload in 2 availability zones. That's a highly available workload. So if we move on to consider backups, because it's all well and good being highly available, what if the worst does happen? And again, there's a couple of concepts that you have to consider before you get into the backups. Rachel, how many times have you heard a customer ask you, what's an RPO? What's an RTO?
Yeah, a lot. A lot of my customers ask those questions.
Ultimately, the well-architected framework looks for a well-defined recovery point objective and recovery time objective. And in the startup ecosystem, and even in some very mature small to medium businesses, you'll find that it's not been something that's been thought about. In a lot of cases, where you see the terms RPO and RTO, you'll have an executive that's written it down in the contract somewhere. We've got an RPO of 5 minutes. And then you've got a technical team that go, we can't meet that because our technology doesn't support that. Similarly with an RTO, a recovery time objective. But what is the recovery point objective and what is a recovery time objective? More definitively. A recovery point objective is how much data you want to lose. How much data are you willing to lose? Again, it's a tolerance level. Similarly with an RTO, I call it, how much business do you want to lose? It's the time it takes you to recover from a large outage. The time it takes you to get back to productivity. Both of those values need to be low, but they also need to be achievable. And these are decisions that need to be made between an executive and a technical lead. They need to be a compromise. What is it we can achieve versus what is it we can contract out to? So once that decision's been made, you then need to look at how to apply that as well. What technology is available for us to help us with these RPOs and RTOs? From a technology perspective, if you're running a database on RDS or even DynamoDB, you have the benefit of a point-in-time restore. Point-in-time restore is based upon a snapshot technology, which allows you to go back in time with your database to about 5 minutes to 15 minutes granularity, depending on the system and the engine and the logging system. That then means that couple that up with standard snapshotting, regular snapshotting every day or twice a day, you end up with a sliding scale RPO instead, something that's far more dynamic, that depends on the incident. For example, if you dropped a customer record or a transaction, you could use point-in-time restore to go back to 5 minutes ago, or the point in time that you think it might have been, and recover that transaction, specifically that record, and inject it back into your database. Whereas if you had an entire instance failure, you could recover from the snapshot from 12 hours ago. Assuming that you take a snapshot every 12 hours, that means that your RPO is all of a sudden 5 minutes to 12 hours, depending on incident. With EC2 instances, your RPO is going to be very much more related to your snapshot times. So it will be more closer to that 12 hours or less, depending on how many snapshots you take. EC2 instances, realistically, when you start to set them up in a production environment and they're auto-scaling, they should start to be ephemeral. They should start to be having your data in the database, having your files on a shared file system. In that case, and the logs sent off to a central logging system, which means that actually the EC2 instance becomes disposable. So then by putting that EC2 instance in an auto-scaling group, it becomes an auto-healing group. Once that instance fails, it will repopulate itself with another instance. So you've just gone from having that 12-hour RTO to the recovery time of 5 minutes again, the time it takes to repopulate another instance that's gone unhealthy, as long as you've considered the EC2 instance ephemeral. So between multi-AZ strategies and point-in-time restores and using auto-scaling groups as auto-healing groups, you should have a very good handle on high availability and a good backup strategy. To tail off the end of the backup strategy, consider AWS Backup as your primary source of backup for your data, because at the end of the day, your data needs to stay safe, and AWS Backup stores your data in a highly available, secure vault. That means it doesn't matter what incident that you are currently working with, your data is still safe. It's audited as a standard backup as well, so you get a list of all the different backup jobs as a standard audit, and you can test them and recover them very easily. It also orchestrates all the backups across all of the services that you require. For example, it can back up DynamoDB, RDS, EC2, EFS, and other such services. Moving on to the next topic of reliability, and that's disaster recovery. I often ask my customers, and Rachel will attest to this, have you got a disaster recovery plan, and how often do you test it? Rachel, I'll ask you now, how many times do you, what's the general response from customers? What's the consensus here?
It's generally a bit of an afterthought. It's often customers, unfortunately, don't think about it until it's a little bit too late and they've had something go wrong.
And a lot of the times, even if they have thought about it, how often do they test their backup strategies or the disaster recovery plans?
It's not enough. It's probably the simplest way to answer, Alan. I'm not going to throw my customers under the bus.
Wow, I was trying to be kind. It's a very common situation when I sit in a well-architected framework review with a customer and I ask them about the disaster recovery strategy, and sometimes it's not been the thing to think about. And when you're a startup, you're excited. You're excited about your product and you're excited to go to market, and sometimes it's not the first priority. There's a lot of the ways that AWS can help you in forming different types of disaster recovery, BCPs, plans, strategies to help you stay safe. But there's 3 different types of disasters to plan for. And before I explain those, it's best to understand the global AWS infrastructure first. AWS is made up of, first and foremost, regions. Each region is geographically assigned. We have here in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne. In America, there is Oregon, North Virginia, it's North California, and there's Ohio. So they're quite far spread apart, and there's a lot of them. Europe's got a handful, as has Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia as well. And there were talks of one coming up in New Zealand as well. Each region, each geographical region is separated into a minimum of 3 isolated availability zones. That means you could pick anywhere, any points within a single region as an availability zone to then separate your workloads. Each availability zone is physically separated as a separate data center. In fact, each availability zone is a cluster of data centers with multiple points of cooling and power. So the availability zones are quite well redundant anyway, and then you can spread your workload across the 3 availability zones to make it further redundant. So with that in mind, the 3 types of disaster to be planned and practiced for are accidental data loss. So you lost that customer transaction that I spoke about earlier. How are you going to recover from that? Instance loss. So you lose an EC2 instance, you lose an RDS instance, or maybe a container or a Lambda function. I didn't mention those earlier, but they also very much have similar concepts. If you lose one of those in the middle of a working day or halfway through a customer transaction, how is the system going to recover? Is it going to be automatic? Is your auto healing group going to recover that? Is your database going to automatically spin up the second failover in a multi-AZ configuration? So instance loss. And the third and final disaster that you need to be planned and practiced for is availability zone failure. And this is a big one, right? This is not anything to sniff at. But if you lost an availability zone, how would you recover for that? Is your system going to automatically move over to the new availability zone? Is it going to absorb that? There are configurations that you can set up which will allow you to automatically recover from that situation. But also respect as well the magnitude of event that has to happen to take out a whole availability zone and how many people would be impacted as well. So that's disaster recovery. How do you implement well-architected best practices, though, into your business? Is probably the key question, especially when it comes to reliability. I'd say overall, the key thing is design your system with well-architected in mind. At the end of the day, those three things should be in the back of your head when you design a workload. The accidental data loss, the instance loss, and the availability zone loss should all be scenarios that are not there to scare you, but certainly there to help you design a much more resilient architecture. It's like building a house. At the end of the day, you have to build a good foundation first before you build the house on top of it. And that's what you're doing with these well-architected best practices. And it doesn't matter if it's a change or if it's a new feature. Think well-architected as you go along. You might be improving the workload, existing workload, by then applying well-architected best practices in the next change. It may also expose changes that need to happen further later to then further improve you. That exposure may have saved you an outage that would have costed you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Build a strategy of remediation. Prioritize. If it's an existing workload and you've realized, I've got all these gaping holes in my reliability plan, try and prioritize it. Don't try and fix everything at once. Sometimes that can cause you more problems than good. Build on a strategy based upon priority, high, medium, other, and keep it simple. Well-architected doesn't have to be complex or expensive. It's important to review your architecture every 12 months. People happen, problems happen, and standards change. It's always worth reviewing and remediating. Last year's best practice might actually be this year's security problem. So always check what the new best practices are. Treat the well-architected framework review like a service for your car. It's important to get that review done. And if you're unsure on how to go about doing a well-architected framework review, then try and engage with a well-architected partner. We're here to help perform these reviews. We're here to ultimately make sure you get the best out of your architecture. In fact, the person that knows more about this part of it than me is Rachel. So I'm going to pass over to Rachel to go over how Thoughtworks can help you with your well-architected activities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. So I'll just go through a bit about how Thoughtworks approaches our delivery of a well-architected framework review. So this is a 3-hour conversational review, and there's absolutely no prep required from our customers. The conversation is guided by Alan, and he and his team do pivot as the conversation progresses and as we gather the information from you. The only thing we ask in preparation is that you provide a copy of your most recent AWS bill pre-review so that we can get a head start on the cost optimization section. And this way we can see what services you utilize most ahead of time. Also, if you have a copy of any architectural diagrams, or how many times do you say architectural in one presentation, these can also be really helpful for us as well. So following the review, what we'll do is provide you with a detailed remediation report within about 2 to 5 days, usually is how much it takes us. The report is split into 3 sections. So an executive summary containing our main handful of recommendations, It also has a matrix, which is a breakdown of how many high, median, or information pieces we find in your environment. And that's what you can see on this photo here. And then also a detailed technical report that breaks down each of these items and showcases our recommendations. All of these are very conversational sessions. They're very educational as well. So it's always a really great learning experience for you and your team. All right, and why should you choose Thoughtworks to do your well-architected framework review? So we have delivered 311 wafers. This is a quite old stat by about 2 weeks, I think. So I imagine it's probably getting close to 320 by now, but we've also supported in remediating 8,199 of these high-risk items post well-architected framework review. And our average CSAT score across these deliveries is 4.9 out of 5. So yeah, that's why you should choose Thoughtworks. And if you would like to schedule in a well-architected framework with us, please grab out your phone right now and use this QR code, and Alan and I'll be more than happy to help you with this. Or you're welcome to reach out to us using our details, which we'll provide at the end of this presentation as well. All right. Now we might get into a bit of a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat now. I'm just going to wait for a little while and then we'll go through those.
Just in the meantime, I just want to thank Rachel for hosting today. She's done an awesome job. I know she was quite nervous coming on doing one of these things, so I was more than happy to oblige.
Thank you. Thanks very
I've
much,
also
Alan,
put the link down there for booking the review as well.
Wonderful. And you've been an excellent host as well, Alan, so thank you. We have had one question come through anonymously. So the question, Alan, is what is the bare minimum that a new business or startup would have to do? I imagine it's referring to what they will have to do to I guess, be reliable.
It's a good question because as much as we say it's important to be reliable and have your backups and have your disaster recovery plan, you've got to remember it's your business at the end of the day. It is whatever your business strategy and business requirements need. You've got to think, if this thing goes down, if this architecture, this workload is compromised, there isn't a backup, we lose the data, it goes down for 8 hours, how does it not only impact us commercially, but also how does it impact us from the perspective of our brand recognition, from our reputation? So from a technical bare bones minimum, I'd say make sure you've got backups, minimum 24 hours, one a day, if not once every 12 hours. Architect for auto recovery, if possible. And that doesn't have to be expensive. Auto scaling groups, I mentioned those earlier, or auto healing groups, they don't cost a thing to run. They are fairly simplistic to install if your workload supports it. But at the same time, they don't cost much to run. A load balancer is also fairly inexpensive. Where it does get expensive is your database. Your database to run at multi-AZ is where your costs are going to happen, but sometimes that's the insurance policy effect. But take the easy wins versus the complex architectural decisions. So tick that box on multi-AZ if your data, if that's the spend you want to make to protect your data. Otherwise, make sure you've got a very good backup strategy in place with point-in-time restore as well. Hopefully that answered that question.
I think it did. What I'm hearing is that backups are very important and not to be an afterthought.
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, we haven't had any other questions come through, so I'm just going to share Alan and my own contact details here. Please reach out, everyone who's joined. We'd love to hear from you again, hear a bit more about your business. Sorry. So reach out, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. See you at episode 4.
Thanks, guys. See you in episode 4. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan.